All right, let's dive in today, exploring some really cool strategies for raising kids who are, well, mentally strong and emotionally healthy. The kind of kids who can handle what life throws at them. We've got a bunch of different sources for this deep dive.
Oh, very cool.
Some parenting experts on YouTube, some snippets from books I found super insightful, and even a brain health expert we'll hear from on the Jay Shetty podcast. Should be a fascinating mix.
Yeah, I love that you've pulled from all these different places. It'll be interesting to see how they connect.
Totally. So first up is this parenting expert on YouTube, Emma Hubbard. She talks about creating what she calls a yes space. And it's not just your basic toddler proofing.
Right.
It's more about intentionally designing an environment
Yeah.
where exploration is encouraged. What do you think about that?
I think it's brilliant. I mean, constantly saying no can be exhausting for both the parent and the child.
Totally.
So creating a space where kids can freely explore without hearing no every 2 seconds.
Yeah.
That's a game changer.
It makes so much sense. And she suggests some specific things like using soft surfaces, low shelves for toys, and even strategically placed mirrors.
I like that, the mirrors. Kids love seeing themselves, right?
Yeah.
It's like developmental, too. They can see themselves moving, interacting with their environment.
That's so true. I hadn't even thought about that. And it makes the whole yes space thing feel less, I don't know, restrictive.
Right.
It's not just about taking things away. It's about adding things that actually HLP.
Exactly.
Now, here's another thing Emma Hubbard talks about that I thought was super interesting. Giving kids positive instructions instead of always telling them what not to do.
Okay, yeah.
So instead of don't run, you'd say
Okay.
walking feet inside, just making it clear what they should be doing.
Makes sense to me. I mean, even as adults, we prefer clear instructions, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's less confusing, less room for misinterpretation. And for kids, it's probably even more important.
Right. And it just feels more empowering, too. They're not constantly being told what they're doing wrong.
Yeah.
They're being guided towards the right choice.
Exactly. It's like giving them a roadmap instead of just putting up roadblocks.
Perfect analogy. Okay, now this next expert we're going to hear from is Dr. Paul Jenkins on his show, live on Purpose TV. He talks about the power of certain phrases, like, good luck, and you can handle this. I mean, it seems so simple, but do you think those little phrases can actually make a big difference?
Oh, I think so. Definitely. Good luck. It acknowledges that the child has some agency, some control over the situation.
I see.
It's not just a parent dictating everything. And that's huge for developing independence.
So it's less helicopter parent and more...
Exactly. More like, I trust you to figure this out.
I love that.
And you can handle this. That's all about building confidence. It's counteracting that feeling of, oh, I can't do this. It's telling them, you've got this.
Makes me think about the messages I got growing up. I wonder if they shaped how I handle things now,
Oh, for sure. The messages we receive early on, they stay with us. So it's powerful stuff.
Totally. Now, back to Emma Hubbard for a minute. She has this really practical tip I wanted to share. Toy rotation.
Toy rotation. What's that?
Basically, you put away most of their toys, and then you rotate them regularly.
Oh, okay.
So there's always something new to discover. I figured this must be a lifesaver when it comes to the constant requests for new toys.
I can see that. But it's not just about keeping things fresh, right?
Right.
I bet it helps kids focus more, too, when they're not overwhelmed by a million choices.
That's exactly it. She talks about how it promotes independence and longer play sessions.
Interesting. So less need for the parent to constantly entertain them.
Exactly. The kids are more engaged with the toys they do have.
Love it. It's like a win-win, less clutter, more focused play. What's not to love?
Right. Okay, last thing from Emma Hubbard for now. Making transitions easy. We all know those moments, right? Leaving the park, ending playtime, whatever. It can be a battle.
Oh, yeah. Meltdowns galore.
But she suggests using natural breaks, like the end of a TV show.
Baksha.
Or finishing a meal. It makes the transition feel less abrupt.
I like that. It's less we have to go N now W.
Yeah.
More like, okay, this is finished. Now we're moving on to the next thing.
Exactly. She also recommends using timers or counting down activities.
Oh, good.
So instead of saying we're leaving in 5 minutes, which, let's be honest, means nothing to a toddler,
Right. Huh?
you say 5 more slides and then we're going home.
It's concrete, it's visual, it's something they can grasp.
Exactly. And it gives them a sense of control, too, which I think helps a lot.
Absolutely. They know what to expect so they can mentally prepare.
Okay, switching gears a bit, Dr. Paul Jenkins, he emphasizes the importance of saying, I love you no matter what.
Powerful words.
Right. It seems basic, but why do you think it's so important to make that explicit?
Because it creates this foundation of unconditional love.
Yes.
It tells the child, your worth is not dependent on your behavior.
Yeah.
I love you regardless.
Yeah.
And that's huge EE for their emotional well-being.
Totally. It takes the pressure off of having to be perfect.
Exactly. They can make mistakes, they can mess up, and they know they're still loved.
So important. Now,
Yeah.
this ties in nicely with what Dr. Daniel Amen talked about on the Jay Shetty podcast.
Okay.
He's a big advocate for setting boundaries,
Right.
but doing so with love and logic. So it's not about being permissive.
Mm-hmm.
It's about having clear expectations while maintaining that loving foundation we were just talking about.
I like that. It's like being firm but kind.
Yes, that's perfect. He actually shared this story about his daughter Chloe and her homework.
Oh, tell me about it.
So instead of nagging her to do it or doing it for her, which, let's be honest, we've all been tempted to do,
Guilty.
he just emphasized that it was her responsibility and that she'd face the natural consequences if she didn't complete it.
Interesting. What happened?
Well, she actually started doing her homework consistently. And not only that, she thrived academically.
Wow. So it actually worked.
It did. And it took the pressure off of him to be the homework police.
I bet. It's like empowering her to take ownership of her learning.
Exactly. It's that theme of agency again, coming up in a different context.
It's amazing how it all connects, isn't it?
It really is. And we've just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore when it comes to raising mentally strong kids, but we'll have to save that for the next part of our deep dive.
I can't wait. This is fascinating stuff.
Me too.
Yeah.
We'll be back soon to unpack even more insights and strategies. Stay tuned.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we're back, and I'm still thinking about that interview with Dr. Daniel Amen on the Jay Shetty podcast.
Oh, yeah. He had so many great insights.
He did. Like, one thing that really stuck with me was how he talked about the brain. He
Wow.
said, we need to think of it as an organ, not just this, like, abstract concept.
Right.
It made me realize how important it is to actually take care of our brains.
Totally.
Mm.
And it's not just for us adults. It's especially crucial for kids.
Yeah.
Their brains are still developing, so it's like extra important to give them what they need to thrive.
Exactly. And he talked about how nutrition plays a big role.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What we eat affects how we feel, how we think, everything.
Right. And sleep, too.
Oh, big time.
And managing stress.
It's all connected.
It is. And I realized, like, those are all things we talk about for ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't always think about how much they impact our kids.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and forget about the big picture,
Totally. Now, another thing Dr. Amen talked about that I found fascinating was those automatic negative thoughts.
ANTs, he calls them.
Yes, ANTs, like those thoughts that just pop into your head and tell you you're not good enough or whatever.
Ugh, those are the worst.
I know. And they can really mess with a kid's self-esteem, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, imagine being a kid and constantly having those negative thoughts swirling around.
I can't even imagine.
It's heartbreaking.
So what can we do about it?
Well, Dr. Amen suggests teaching kids to question those thoughts,
Okay.
to ask themselves, like, is this really true? What's the evidence?
So helping them develop a more realistic perspective.
Exactly. It's about giving them the tools to combat those ANTs,
Yeah.
not let them take over.
It's like empowering them to take control of their own thoughts.
Exactly.
He actually has this children's book called Captain Snout and the Superpower Questions that teaches kids how to do this.
Oh, I love that. It's so important to start early,
Totally. Okay, now let's talk about something that's on every parent's mind these days. Technology.
Oh, boy.
Dr. Amen seems pretty concerned about excessive screen time, especially for younger kids.
I can see why. There's a lot of research showing the negative impacts,
Right, like on attention span, sleep, social skills.
And it's not just about the content they're consuming, it's about the actual impact on brain development.
That's what's scary, right? Like their brains are still forming and we're exposing them to all this stimulation.
It's a lot for those little brains to handle.
So what does he recommend?
Well, he suggests delaying technology as long as possible.
Okay.
And then, once it is introduced, setting firm limits.
Makes sense.
And he also emphasizes the importance of modeling healthy tech habits ourselves,
Oh, that's a good point.
Like if we're constantly on our phones, what message are we sending our kids?
Right. It's that whole do as I say, not as I do thing, which never works.
Exactly. We need to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
I love that. Okay, another thing Dr. Amen is a big advocate for: rules, routines, rhythms in family life.
That's interesting. Why do you think that is?
Well, he talked about how it creates a sense of predictability and stability for kids.
Makes sense. Kids thrive on routine, right? They like to know what to expect.
They do. It helps them feel safe and secure, and it reduces anxiety.
I can see that. When there's a consistent routine, they don't have to worry about what's coming next.
Exactly. They can just relax and be kids.
And that frees up mental space for them to explore, learn, and grow.
Absolutely. He also talked about the importance of noticing what you like more than what you don't.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right. So instead of constantly pointing out what they're doing wrong, we make an effort to acknowledge and appreciate their positive actions.
Like catching them being good.
Exactly. And when we do that, it encourages them to repeat those behaviors.
It's positive reinforcement, right?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
much more effective than just focusing on the negative.
And it creates a more positive and appreciative environment for everyone.
Definitely a win-win. Now, I know a lot of parents struggle with discipline,
Uh-huh.
and Dr. Amen has some really interesting thoughts on this. He talks about being firm and kind.
Ooh, I like that. It's that balance we were talking about before.
Exactly. Setting clear boundaries and consequences, but doing so in a loving and respectful way.
It's not about punishing them.
Right.
It's about teaching them.
And he emphasizes the importance of following through on what we say.
Oh, that's huge.
If we say we're going to do something, we need to do it.
Consistency is key, right?
It is. It builds trust and shows them that we mean what we say.
And it reinforces that predictability that they crave.
Now, what about when kids make mistakes?
Well, Dr. Amen is a big believer in natural consequences.
Okay.
It's about letting them experience the natural outcomes of their choices.
So instead of rescuing them, we let them learn from their mistakes.
Exactly. Of course, we're not talking about putting them in dangerous situations.
Right.
It's about letting them face age-appropriate consequences that teach valuable lessons.
Like if they forget their lunchbox, they might have to go hungry.
Yeah, or if they don't clean their room, they might not be able to find their favorite toy.
It's not about being mean.
Right.
It's about letting them experience the natural order of things.
And it reinforces that sense of agency and accountability that we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Now, Dr. Amen's perspective on love and logic is also really interesting.
Tell me more.
He talks about how true love isn't about overprotecting or overindulging our children. It's about equipping them with the tools and skills they need to navigate the world independently.
That's deep.
It is. He keeps coming back to that example of not bringing Chloe's homework to school for her.
Right.
It wasn't about being mean or uncaring. It was about giving her the space to learn a valuable lesson about responsibility.
And she thrived because of it.
Exactly. So sometimes the most loving thing we can do is step back and let them figure things out on their own.
Powerful stuff. Now, another key point Dr. Amen made was about the importance of modeling mental strength ourselves.
Yes. We can't expect our kids to be mentally strong if we're not.
Exactly. They learn by watching us.
So if we want them to manage their stress, we need to show them how we manage our own stress.
And if we want them to be resilient, we need to demonstrate resilience in our own lives.
Which is tough, let's be honest.
Oh, for sure. Parenting is hard.
But that's why Dr. Amen talks about the win or learn mindset.
Oh, I like that.
It's about embracing the fact that we're not going to be perfect, but we can learn from our mistakes and keep growing.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. And that goes for our kids, too.
Absolutely. We need to teach them that it's okay to mess up as long as they learn from it.
But what about those times when things get really tough?
Like what?
Like when our kids are struggling with friendships, social media, even divorce.
Those are big challenges.
They are, and Dr. Amen emphasizes the importance of active listening,
Okay.
creating a safe space for our kids to share their feelings without judgment.
So important.
It's about being that supportive presence, that safe harbor in the storm.
I love that analogy.
And when it comes to specific challenges like social media, he suggests delaying access as long as possible
Makes sense.
and then setting firm boundaries once it is introduced.
And having those open and honest conversations about the potential risks.
Yes, helping them develop that critical eye and the ability to navigate the online world safely.
It's about empowering them, not sheltering them.
I like that. Now, what about divorce? Any advice there?
Dr. Amen stresses the importance of putting the child's well-being first,
Of course.
avoiding bad-mouthing the other parent,
Right.
and working together as much as possible to create a stable and loving environment.
It's about showing them that even in the midst of change, they're still loved and supported.
Exactly. And that we can handle tough times with grace and determination.
Wow, so much to think about.
I know, right? But I feel like we're starting to get a clearer picture of what it takes to raise mentally strong kids.
We are. It's about creating that foundation of love and security while also giving them the space and tools to develop their own agency and resilience.
And remembering that we're all in this together, learning and growing alongside them.
I love that. All right, we've covered a lot of ground today. Any final thoughts before we move on?
Just, this has been so insightful.
Me too. I'm feeling inspired and hopeful.
Me too. Like, we can do this. We can raise amazing kids who are equipped to handle whatever life throws at them.
Absolutely. We'll be back soon for the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore even more strategies for raising mentally strong kids. Stay tuned. All right, so as we wrap up this deep dive into raising mentally strong kids, I think it's helpful to sort of like revisit some of the key themes.
Yeah, definitely. There's been so much good stuff.
Right, like this whole idea of fostering a child's agency. That's come up again and again.
It really has. It's such a shift from how, a lot of us were raised.
Yeah, that more traditional do as I say kind of thing.
Exactly. This is more about empowering kids to be active participants in their own lives,
Making choices, experiencing consequences, all that.
Right. And that story about Dr. Amon's daughter, Chloe, and the homework.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect example. It wasn't about being like a mean dad.
Right.
It was about giving her the space to learn that responsibility.
And it worked. I mean, she started doing her homework, and she thrived.
It's amazing, isn't it? Like, sometimes stepping back is the best thing we can do.
Totally. But obviously, we're not talking about putting kids in dangerous situations.
Yeah. No, of course not. It's about finding that balance.
Right, right.
Providing support, but also letting them experience those natural consequences.
So they can learn those valuable lessons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's often more effective than us just lecturing them,
Oh, for sure. Now, what about those ANTs, those automatic negative thoughts? Dr. Emmon talked a lot about those.
Oh, yeah, the sneaky little things. They can really do a number on a kid's confidence.
They can. So how do we help them deal with those?
Well, he suggests teaching kids to question those thoughts.
Okay.
Like, is this thought really true? What's the evidence?
Yeah.
Helping them think critically.
It's like giving them the power to challenge those negative thoughts, right?
Exactly. Instead of just letting them run wild.
And it ties in with that whole growth mindset thing too, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's about seeing challenges as opportunities to learn and grow.
Not as failures.
Right. And praising effort, not just results.
So instead of saying, you're so smart, you might say, I'm so proud of how hard you worked on that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a subtle shift,
Yeah.
but it can make a big difference.
For sure. But let's not forget about connection, building those strong relationships with our kids.
Oh, that's fundamental. I mean, it's the foundation for everything.
Dr. Amen talked about quality time, being present, putting away the phones.
Yeah, it's about those little moments, those connections that really matter.
Playing games, going for walks, just talking.
Right. It all adds up.
And modeling healthy relationships, too.
Well, it's huge.
He said, the best thing you can do for your child is to love your spouse.
I remember that. Such a powerful statement.
And even if you're not in a romantic relationship, you can still model healthy relationships with friends, family.
Absolutely. It's about showing them what respect, communication, all that looks like in action.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm feeling, hopeful. Like, we can do this,
Me too. It's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about being present, attentive, willing to learn and grow alongside our kids.
And creating that supportive environment where they feel loved and empowered.
Yeah. Exactly. And remembering that we're not alone on this journey. There are resources, experts, other parents who've been there.
That's so true. Well, thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been an amazing conversation.
I agree. Thanks for having me.
And to all of you listening out there, we hope you feel inspired and equipped to approach parenthood with confidence and compassion. You've got this.